powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, this is Football at 4.
And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Adam Kaplan and this man, Geoff Mosher's in the house as we talk a little Mosher Monday. Football at 4. Eagles win. Jalen Hurts, the defense, the story, really domination from both sides of the ball. I don't know who you can be more impressed with, but I guess, Geoff Mosher, we start with this. What's more sustainable, Jalen Hurts' play or the way that John Gannon's defense has dominated the last 2 weeks? Both of these guys have been tremendous, or both, Hurts and the defensive output have been tremendous, but which one do you believe has sustainability?
Man, that's a tough question. I think, I think both of them are going to be difficult to sustain, or else the Eagles are going to go 17-0. I mean, there's going to be somebody, there's going to be a team that comes along and probably figures out a way to slow down the Eagles offense or force them into a bad day, but may not be able to do that for the Eagles defense, and then vice versa. I don't think you're seeing sort of flash in the pan play. I think you're seeing a well-coordinated offense and defense with the right personnel for the scheme coming into fruition. Now, again, they're not going to go 17-0. There's going to be a day where a good coach, good quarterback, good whatever, defensive game plan figures them out a little bit. But I don't think you're seeing things that are unexplainable. Like some of the Devontae Smith catches yesterday. I mean, he was known as a guy who can climb that wall and go get the passes the way he did at Alabama. He's doing it here. Same thing with A.J. Brown. The way your defense is playing, you got a lot of pass rushers who are rushing the passer. That's the way the design is, and you're getting good coverage on the back end. So I think if anything's going to falter a little bit as the tape grows and things go on, it probably would be the defense, because I do think that if there's a team that's willing to be patient and attack the Eagles up the middle with the run game, Washington was successful at it, the Lions were successful at it, that team might give itself a chance to play ball control offense and keep the ball out of the Eagles' offensive hands and maybe shorten the game, so to speak.
Let me ask you about the way that you're watching this offense right now, and they're scoring a lot of points early, and then they're kind of not scoring in the second half. Is that because of what the Eagles are doing, or teams making the adjustments and the Eagles are having trouble with that? Why? And is it a concern to you at all that they seemingly are basically coasting to the finish line?
Nope, not a concern. It's not a concern because they're averaging, 28 points a game? So that's enough points to win an NFL game. If it was 14 in the first half and 14 in the second half, would that matter? It would be a concern to me if they were scoring, 13 to 14 points in the first half and then not scoring in the second half and either winning close games 14-10 or losing something 17-14. The uncanny thing is that in the last two games, you've seen them score on 2, 3, 4 consecutive possessions, which is not sustainable in the NFL. No, very few offenses just score a touchdown, get the ball back, score a touchdown, get the ball back, score another touchdown, the way the Eagles have been able to do in a very streaky way. So at the end of the day, I look at it as did they score enough points to win a traditional ball game? And usually if you score 28 points, you do. So what does it matter if it's all in one, one fell swoop in a quarter or spread out? I know that in tight games, you're going to want to see them score at the end and pull away, but you have not seen it tight because they've scored in great bunches so far. So no one's ever gonna take that away.
Geoff, I know that in the offseason the big question mark was will Jalen Hurts take that step forward? And you write on InsideTheBirds.com that he's 3 for 3, and I think your assessment and your observation is spot on, because each of those three are in different ways. What he saw in the Lions game, what he saw in the Vikings game, and what the Commanders tried to do. Can you explain that a little more, that he's acing every test so far?
Yeah, I agree, Pete, that I wrote 3 for 3, not because they've won 3 games, but because he's seen 3 different attack plans and mastered them all, beat them all. The Lions came after him, and he had to win that game differently. He had to win that game outside of the pocket as much as inside of the pocket. And then for some people, that wasn't good enough. That was you're You're doing what you did last year. You ran too much. And we did talk about it. He did have to run too much, but the offensive line caused some of those issues. The second game was like the complete opposite. It was almost like Ed Donatel said, I am going to do the exact opposite of what the Lions did. I am going to do nothing but play coverage. And Jalen Hurts had so much time in the pocket to just play pitch and catch with his wide receivers, and he made some really terrific throws as the game went on. And then I think I said with you guys on Friday, or you, Mike, on Wednesday, whatever, last time I was on, I said somewhere there's going to be some team's going to try to in between this, right? They're not going to attack Jalen Hurts relentlessly like the Lions, but they're not just going to sit back all day either. They're going to blitz him at times. They're going to play coverage at times. They're going to try to confuse Jalen on when they're blitzing and when they're playing coverage. And Washington did mix that more so, and he was able to foil that as well. I guess the only test really now for Jalen is sort of consistency, doing it week in and week out beyond 3 weeks. And then there is going to be a game where the defense will be able to do what Washington did, except not be down by 20 points. So it's going to be a little bit of a cat and mouse game. It's going to be close. It's going to be, tit for tat there. And he's going to have to respond to what they're doing in the fourth quarter when they're trying to mix it up.
Right, maybe a game that comes down to the wire. Geoff Mosher with us. So I want to ask you this. What was your bigger takeaway from yesterday's game? Was it the play of Jalen Hurts, or was it the 9 sacks on the defense? Because if you only had to choose one, which one raised your eyebrows more? Which one had you go, oh, my goodness?
Yeah, I mean, you don't come around 9 sacks very often in a game. That was pretty amazing. So that one really stood out. And what really stands out about it, Pete, is sort of the under-discussed storyline of how these 9 sacks came about. Because from a TV standpoint, what we see is Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham and Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat just flattening Carson Wentz one after another. And a lot of those came on 4-man rushes. But as bad as the Washington offensive line can be, I mean, it's the same offensive line that for the first 2 weeks, minus the center, right, protected Carson enough for him to win one, lose one, but score a lot of points in both. But I think the coverage that you're not seeing, because you don't see the all-22, from James Bradbury, from Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, from TJ Edwards, you can't have those kind of coverage sacks if these weapons aren't manned up fairly well. And that was Carson was trying. Carson's hanging in there, trying to make a play, trying to throw to an outlet 10 to 20 yards downfield, and he couldn't do it because nobody was open. And, that to me is the under-discussed storyline that really made yesterday pretty special there, is that the Eagles are getting really good man coverage from some of the guys because the ball isn't going their way because Carson's on the ground, you're not hearing their name a lot.
Yeah, that's a good point. Geoff Mosher, InsideTheBirds.com, the podcast. They go deep into this game over on the podcast. You can listen to him and Adam break it all down. I want to get your thoughts on Hurts in terms of, is he just playing exceptionally well, or is this a byproduct of having better weapons? Are they making him look better? Because there's a lot of times, like we've discussed this, Jalen was kind of up and down last year. Well, his receivers weren't helping him a lick. You had to throw the ball perfectly last year pretty much to get a big play. Is it a combination of he's just playing that well, or is it, man, these two guys, adding Brown and then having Smith as your second option is just elevating his play to another level?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that this is a multi-layered discussion. I think Jalen Hurts is clearly playing better than he did last year. His accuracy is good. His mechanics are good because he's in a well-protected pocket for the most part, and he has not needed to bail for the last 2 games. There's been not much pressure on him. And so he's trusting his receivers. I think that goes to what you just said, Mike. The second part of it is when you put A.J. Brown on the field and you have Devontae Smith in year 2, you see he's not afraid to throw a ball up there and allow his receivers to make a play. And I don't think last year, there were probably some times where he threw a ball up there hoping his receiver would make a play, and they didn't make a play. Receivers not named Devontae Smith there. So you're seeing a combination of those two things, and I think the under-discussed part is that I really do think that this offensive coaching staff is doing an excellent job of play calling. It's easy to say after 3 wins, but it's not just that, hey, they call plays and they're working. I think that they're sequencing plays, meaning they're calling X, Y, and Z early in the game to set up A, B, and C later in the game. Or I guess that would be vice versa. A, B, and C to set up X, Y, and Z. But the point is, I think they don't just call plays to say, hey, this is a good play versus that defensive look. This is a good play, especially out of an RPO formation personnel grouping where we can do this, but then we can turn up the tempo, which I think has been a big part of their success, and then run different plays out of the same personnel grouping, and that's going to keep the offense or the defense from being able to substitute. It's going to keep them from being able to get a tell. It's going to keep them from staying fresh. They're going to get tired. I think the tempo has been a big part of their success too. And you just marry all those three things. Jalen Hurts' improvement, better receiving targets, better play calling. Everything's going well right now.
Yeah, and I guess, we won't know because Jalen's played so well. But I guess we'll find out if there's a game where he's just not playing all that well, which so far he's been pretty accurate.
Right.
I mean, he's throwing the ball where it needs to be.
Yeah, I don't look forward to it, but there's going to be a game that the Eagles lose, and there's going to be a game where Jalen Hurts doesn't play well.
Sure.
And I would hope that and I know better, but I would hope that the next Monday that enough people can look and say, okay, that's a game. Everybody has a bad game. Go look at some of the best quarterbacks in the league last night and yesterday. Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady. They didn't have great games, right? So some of them won, but not everybody had great games. It happens.
Yeah.
Every year, some of the best quarterbacks lose 3 or 4 times a year,
well,
and
Jeff,
it might just be that.
The play that I'm thinking of that they don't score on last year is the touchdown to A.J. Brown, where he gets the one-on-one coverage.
Right.
He throws it a little bit behind Brown, but Brown gets inside. He's big enough and strong enough and physical enough to go and still catch that
Smith
ball.
helped too. Smith on his route.
With the D-back draped on him, and then he carries that guy into the end zone. That's probably a ball that's incomplete last year or, who knows, intercepted, bouncing off somebody's hands, tipped up in the air. But that just shows you that he doesn't have to be laser accurate all game long because he has guys that can now make that play. And, A.J. Brown, I think, has changed the dynamic of a lot of this offense.
Absolutely. I do think that that touchdown you're talking about was intentionally thrown a little bit behind A.J. Brown because of the route concept that they had the interior receiver running the exact same route, and there wasn't much space in between. So to keep it away from the corner, I believe he threw it where only A.J. can catch it. And then the play strength is what you're talking about. That's what takes over. The play strength that the Eagles have in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, they're both contested catch receivers, but they do it in different ways. A.J. is a little shorter. He's got hands that are so strong that he can grab a ball, turn up field, bowl through guys. And then Devontae Smith showed you he's an elite high point receiver. I mean, he goes up to get the ball and he has just elite concentration. We saw that last year against the Denver Broncos when Jalen Hurts trusted him and threw a ball up there that was well covered by Patrick Surtain, and Devontae Smith came down with it anyway. So I can't remember, certainly since I've been covering the team, there hasn't been one like this. And, you might have to go back to like Quick and Carmichael, where you had 2 receivers that have this much kind of go-get-it type of ability. And honestly, the play strength between both of them is probably the best that they've ever had.
So they're
at that position.
Yeah, they're exploding on offense at times. Jalen Hurts is playing at a high level. The defense is finally starting to show up. Are there some concerns that we're not talking about? I know people say it's nitpicky. Were there some things that were hidden within that game that you didn't like, Jeff?
Well, there are 2 things that'll stand out if we're being nitpicky, right? I mentioned the first one. I still think they are leaky in run defense, and I thought that the Vikings had a chance to exploit it but got away from it early. They seemed to me to want to attack the Eagles on the edges and the flats with the play action, the slow developing screens instead of running right up the middle. And then the Commanders did exploit that. For the first half, they were averaging 4.8 yards per carry, but they just fell behind by so much that they couldn't really rely on the run game. But you saw some pretty big runs up the middle from Antonio Gibson, and Washington had one of the worst run offenses in the NFL coming in to that game. So for them to have such a high yards per carry average, I thought is a little alarming. And really, we talked about this after week 1. You can run on the Eagles because they're undersized. They're not a big defense, and they play a lot of nickel and dime. And, one of their safeties, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, is really like a nickel corner. So if there's a team that's patient enough, and maybe it'll be Jacksonville, although Doug Peterson has never been kind of a run-first guy.
There is a team that's patient enough to run. It was Detroit.
It was. Yeah.
They were down
Detroit
17.
Did a great job, right?
They were down 17 and just kept running. They didn't get away from the run, and that's what got them back.
That's
in that
correct.
Game,
That's correct. So there was a play. I think it was early in the first quarter, guys, where the tight end for Washington, I think it was Bates. He blocked Hassan Reddick so badly on a big run that it was sort of embarrassing. I mean, I know Hassan Reddick's not a defensive end; he's a linebacker. But when you get blocked out of the way like that by a tight end, it's sort of like, I don't know. I don't want to say dehumanizing, but obviously you're going to look at that on the film and you're going to be like, man, I can't believe a tight end just put me on my rear end like that.
Yeah.
So that's something that they've got to
Of course, that Mailata hit on the opposite way. There was one of those, too, that I saw going around social media.
He smoked a D-back. Yeah. There was a corner blitz.
That's just not a fair matchup.
Yeah. Well, there was a corner blitz, and Mailata was tangled up with the end, and he saw the guy coming and just
kind of
crushed
him. Yeah.
I guess the question I would ask.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Real quick. Just the one other thing is the punt return. The punt and kick returning does not look good. Quez Watkins does not look like a natural kick returner to me so far.
Okay.
And then obviously Britton Covey, they're probably going to wind up signing him from the practice squad. They're out of elevations. He muffed one punt. He just, to me, he's such a little guy that every time he gets hit, he looks like he's getting his life knocked out of him. I don't know if you guys thought the same thing on those returns.
The tackling dummy. That's what Schlereth called him, the tackling dummy.
That's right. I'd be a little concerned. Listen, if you're sitting here talking about situational run defense and special teams returns as your biggest weaknesses, that's pretty good.
Yeah. My question, I guess, is are you a little disappointed? I don't want to say concerned, because I know the answer. You're not concerned. Nobody should be anyway. If you are, then then you're being concerned over something that you shouldn't be. But I don't think they ran the ball particularly well yesterday against a team that was struggling to stop the run. Fair or unfair?
They didn't run the ball yesterday, but I don't know why Washington is struggling to stop the run, because they have really good run-stopping personnel with Jonathan Allen, with Deron Payne. Maybe some of that, their stats were because they faced the Lions also, right? They had faced them the week before, and the Lions run all over everybody and run a lot. So it's possible that their run defensive numbers are a little skewed just by 2 weeks of the season. So that didn't concern me that much, because the Eagles are still one of the better running teams in the NFL, and they're going to run into some pretty big fronts every once in a while and not average 5.5 per carry all the time.
I guess we're just so used to seeing the Eagles' offensive line dominate in the run game that it was like, hey, in that game yesterday, second half, when they're trying to run that ball out, they didn't run the ball all that particularly impressive.
No, and again, Washington knows what they're trying to do, and they got, 4 first-round picks in that front seven, Allen and Payne and Montez Sweat and Jamin Davis. And again, I'm Cam Curl, guys, by the way. I think he may have left a little bit with an injury late, but he's a really good safety, and he was not healthy for the first 2 weeks, so he came back and played in that game. So that's another guy to help them in run support. So I think as this season goes on, Washington will prove to be a little bit better defensively than they've looked so far.
All right, Jeff, real quick, I want to get your thoughts on – I'm dropping stuff all over here if you're watching the video, sorry. I want to get your thoughts on – and I don't want to sit here and beat up on Wentz, but what you thought of his performance and just where he kind of is. I guess you could say it was sad kind of at times just watching him take a beating out there. It almost looked like the Eagles took joy in sacking him so many times, but – just like he had 2 decent games. He's put up some decent numbers, but what do you see from where he is at this stage of his career?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, these guys are competitors. You sack someone 9 times as a team, could be your best friend. You're going to revel in that because you just don't get an opportunity like that. But I thought what you saw was vintage sort of Carson Wentz in the face of pressure and a pinched pocket, where my first initial reaction was that he probably didn't have a whole lot of time to make throws, and that offensive line really hurt him. But after watching some of the tape, I thought, no, you know what? There were opportunities for Carson Wentz to get rid of that ball a lot sooner than he did, and that is something that has dogged him for most of his career. He got away with it when he had a great offensive line that can give him that extra time with the Eagles, but when it wasn't, you could see the difference in his play, and then he's been injured a lot because of it since. So I think the Eagles very well knew that if they put pressure on him and that he would not find those outlets underneath, and that's what's going to happen when you face a relentless pass rush and you don't have a great offensive line also. You're going to get hit a lot and you're going to get sacked a lot. To be honest with you, the fact that I only had one fumble and no interceptions on 9 sacks and 17 hits is actually better than you would imagine from Carson Wentz under those situations. But I don't understand like the rush from people to be like, oh, he stinks. I told you he stinks. He doesn't stink. He had 2 good games, first off. And if you say Carson Wentz stinks, if you're a fan right now and saying, I know he stinks, he's horrible, then you're not giving the Eagles credit because the two other teams that faced him were not able to do that to him. So the Eagles were just like Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins came back and had a nice comeback win over the Lions yesterday, right? He didn't stink. He was threw for 260. He threw 2 touchdowns. He wasn't intercepted. I don't think he was sacked very much. So everybody was all like, oh, Kirk Cousins stunk because the Eagles beat him. Well, you're just taking away from what the Eagles are doing well right now when you say that.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And I thought Wentz, I just feel the compiling of injuries has really kind of deteriorated, which was once a fun and exciting player to watch. I mean, he just looks like a guy who doesn't have the confidence because of the injuries. What made him fun and special was he could take off and run and do stuff with his legs and get out of the pocket and make plays happen and keep plays alive. He can't do that anymore.
No, he cannot, and he really, really badly needs a very good offensive line to be successful, just like he had in 2017. Greg Cosell has told us many times that there is a misperception about the Colts offensive line last year because, A, they've got some names on it like Quentin Nelson, and B, because they run for a lot of yards. But in general, that Colts offensive line last year was not a great offensive line for pass protection especially. I'm not taking anything off Carson. Carson doesn't help himself. But the point is that you're not going to see, I don't think, Carson Wentz play at a consistently high level anymore unless you put something like what the Eagles have now or had in 2017 around him. And even then, you're still never going to see what you saw in 2017 with his escapability and Houdini acts and unbelievable throws on the run. Yeah. But he can hurt you if you give him time. And I think if they put a great offensive line around him at Washington, they have a chance to be successful.
All right, Geoff Mosher, the Inside the Birds podcast dropped this morning, so check that out. You get the Inside the Birds pre- and post-game show on Eagle Game Days on their social media channels. Yesterday, Trey Thomas was excellent. Adam and Jeff always do a great job, as always. Football at 4 right here. Adam Kaplan tomorrow right here on the Sports Bash. All right, Jeff, appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right, fellas, have a great one.